Day one, I'm in Washington with a delegation of about 25 of us, people from Australia, Sri Lanka, different parts of Africa, Europe, South America, and the Caribbean. We're all here as part of this international exchange. We're here for 3 weeks. We'll be spending the week in Washington. Then we're going to go to Alabama, to Montgomery. We're going to go to Tulsa and Oklahoma. And then we're going to spend the final week in Illinois, and particularly in Chicago, learning about the history of civil rights, race equality, how it pertains to the African American community. We're going to recognise historical places and locations in America, and also it's an opportunity for us to share our own experiences of fighting race equality, discrimination around the world as well. So watch out for more posts. I'm here outside the White House. Didn't see Joe Biden, he's got COVID. One of the things as part of this trip, we all have to take COVID tests on a regular basis and wear masks to protect ourselves as well. So watch out for more posts and have a great day, everyone.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? I feel real official with this mic.
Day two in Washington with all my fellow delegates from around the world. We were at the National Press Club and sort of central part of Washington, where we met Shanisha Nelson, who is the program officer for the Office of International Visitors, part of the Bureau of International Education and Cultural Affairs. Met her team along with her boss Stacey White, who's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Professional Cultural Exchange, former US Ambassador, and it's really great for them to do a welcome and induction for us. We had a number of speakers in the morning and afternoon. I have to say it was a privilege meeting Ruby Bridges. For those of you who may not be familiar with Ruby Bridges, she was that young girl on the 14th of November 1916 that had federal marshals taking her to one of the very first desegregated schools in America. She was there for a whole academic year before eventually black and white children joined her. So she talked about her experiences of that period, about family, and particularly the work that she does around engaging with young people in the schools, around sort of activism and civil rights. She's her book, This Is Your Time, is a New York Times bestseller, and she has established the Ruby Bridges Foundation, where she does a lot of educational work. It'd be really fantastic for her to come to the UK to share experiences, especially on the aftermath of Child Q. She'll be a great person to inspire young people, educationalists as well. So hopefully something I could work with Hackney Council and others and to make that happen as well. So it was just amazing just to hear her experiences and living through that difficult time in American history. So in Washington, National Press Club, so after lunch we met with Salim Adouf, who's the Advisory Neighbourhood Commissioner based in Washington. Met Annalise M. Bruner, who is her great-grandmother was an eyewitness to what happened at the Tulsa massacre in 1920s. And Mr. Vincent DeForest, who's a conservationist academic as well. All of them share their experiences of issues around the historical legacy, particularly around enslavement, particularly around periods of the last part of the turn of the century. So, a powerful account from Annalise Bruner about the Tulsa massacre. We'll be going to Tulsa as part of this program, so I can give them a bit more details. But she talked about intergenerational trauma. Even though obviously she wasn't there at the time, she actually still relates that powerful experience of what happened at Greenwood. Salim Adouf is a campaigner, activist, trying to fight for the rights of black people in Washington as well. And hopefully we could follow up and do some stuff together. And then Vincent DeForest, who has been doing a lot of work with his brother and co-founder of the African American Institute for Historical Preservation and Community Development as well. He's also been involved in part of that coalition around the UNESCO Slaves Roots Project as well. And all of them gave their version of the impacts of racism, structural racism, on memorial history and what we need to do. I love this quote from Vincent. He said, "We must tell the truth, otherwise there'll be no change." And I think that's quite important for all of us here in the UK. We have to tell the truth, the impacts of racism, structural racism, and how it impacts its impact on intersectionality for us to move on as a society and nation. Hi everyone. Day 3 in Washington as part of my international trip, learning about dismantling race and social justice. Met with Damien Woods, who is a former US diplomat and is an international communicator. He's formed the Panassa Global Agency. He's also working with a number of corporates in America around Black Lives Matter, in terms of what corporates can do around corporate social responsibility, around race equality. So he gave a kind of overview of the history of the American Constitution, federal government, the responsibility of the House of Congress, Senate, the role of the President, and the various committees. And in that context, that's where he described where inbuilt right from the beginning of the American Constitution and establishment of America it pulls away from Britain from 1776, around inbuilt racism and structures in the Constitution, which has been a result of this part of this history of human rights and civil rights movement in America. He also gave his perspectives on the importance of race equality, what can we do in that context, and keeping up the fight as well. And also really just inspiring our members around using the tools around race equity and system leadership as well. Check out Damien Woods. He's very active on social media as well, and I think it'd be quite great to have someone like him to come to the UK to share his perspectives. So in Washington, part 2 of day 3, met with Stanley Jackson, who's the President and Chief Executive of the Anacostia Economic Development Corporation, which is a community development corporation. It's based in the southeastern part of Washington, probably the most deprived neighbourhoods in Washington. And he talks about the work he's doing in the African American community around regeneration, getting people back into work, small businesses, and the impact of community trauma on communities who are trying to move on in their lives despite all the impacts and challenges they face. He's dealing with 5 generations of families since the 1950s and 60s, where the issues of unemployment, poverty, and exclusion is a major issue. I felt sorry for him because he's doing such a lot of work, and I'm sure he's doing the best that he can. But he talked about the whole stuff around economic transformation and mitigating the impact of gentrification and making sure that African Americans do get a fair share deal. So respect to the work that he's doing on the ground. As part of the conversation around neighbourhoods and regeneration, I met a really fascinating guy, Stephen Glaude, President and Chief Executive of the kind of National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations. He's also involved in a whole range of boards, and he's a fundraiser. He's raising money. He's played a key role around affordable housing in Washington, DC, as well as, again, look at the whole stuff around economic regeneration as well. Really interesting person. He gave lots of his perspectives of his own journey and personal experiences through leadership and running a whole range of jobs as well as advising 2 American presidents. He gave some really interesting nuggets. I love this one. He talked about how to use information to make your case, run your business case around race equality and change. And he said, money follows will, and will follow faith. And he just gave the message quite clearly about having faith, having the data, having the evidence to make the case, and then that can convince people as well. He's got clear thinking around race equity, around developing a business model around tackling racism in America. And he talks about his role working with philanthropists and funders, getting millions of dollars out of them around demonstrating that he can deliver on the ground around improving people's lives through housing, employment as well. He talked about his leadership style and leadership skills and navigating that terrain of racism, structural racism as an African American male, but at the same time working with mainstream institutions and organisations, convincing them trying to do the right thing. I think he inspired lots of people in our group, and he was a great speaker. And he's working on a leadership book, which I look forward to reading to him as well. The other thing that he said, 3 key things he said is important. You've got to design solutions, which is very important. Seek validation and make people feel good about what they're doing, because you are doing the heavy lifting and they need the money and resources from philanthropists and funders to make that difference. And I think that's a message for all of us in the UK. When we talk to funders and philanthropists, we are doing the work, give us the resources and the money, because we are doing the heavy lifting around tackling structural discrimination. Hi there, this is day 4 in Washington at the National African American Museum of Culture in Washington, where there are other 19 other museums. This is my second time to the museum. First time I went was in 2019, and that was a fantastic experience. Come back again today, it's still a fantastic experience. We've got some new features in the museum in terms of artists, some new focuses in different cities in America, and they've got a whole new section to do with the African American press and its history. This museum conceived back in 1919, taken many decades for it to happen. It's fantastic that this museum cost over $500 million, a popular attraction in America, and it's got not just the history of African Americans, it's got the history of Africa as well. I'd recommend anyone who does come to America to visit this museum, and it kind of reminds us that this museum, that we need something like this in the UK. We have the Black Culture Archives, and we have a number of national museums who have aspects of Black British history. But wouldn't it be fantastic to have a dedicated museum on Black British culture, legacy, and influence in the future as well? That's what we need to have in Britain. So this is a fantastic tribute to African American culture. The first 2 floors cover the history of Africa, the history of enslavement. The remaining floors cover the period of Jim Crow, Reconstruction, and then looking at different aspects of American legacy, African American legacy, from arts, culture. Still here at the African American Museum. I'm in a section around family history, family genealogy. I think this is one of the key aspects of the museum's work. They're trying to record oral histories of African Americans of different generations, and also they are working with a whole range of organisations who are doing stuff around family genealogy, around digitising records, promoting these records, and encouraging more people to trace their roots, particularly in America. This is something I've been passionate about for a number of years, and I'll be working with the Society of Genealogists, the Solihull Caribbean Family History Group, and a number of people who are doing research from a Pan-African perspective to hopefully organise a conference next year in London on family genealogy. This is particularly important, particularly as you look at the different generations from Windrush, different generations of people come from Africa, and particularly for people of mixed race heritage, and white people wanted to find more about genealogy from a Caribbean and African perspective. So watch out for this. But it's great being here, looking at all the facilities and resources that here at this museum, in capturing family history, digitising records, and encouraging people again to donate to this fantastic museum to preservation of their history. We've got to do the same thing, guys, in the UK. This is my last day in Washington. I've been walking around Howard University again, going to some black-owned workshops and talk to people. I'm actually found the statue of Carl Woodson, who was a resident of Washington, and this is a statue in commemoration of his contribution to Black history internationally, the founder of Negro History Week in 1926, which became Black History Month in America in 1966, in the 1960s, and by 1980s it was called African American History Month. We adopted this in Britain in 1987. As you know, we celebrate in October, and also it's inspired other history months, such as LGBT History Month, Bengali History Month, Travellers History Month, more recently Southeast Asian History Month as well, and there are plans for East Asian History Month. So thank you, Constantine Woodson. You inspired all of us over the last decades in celebrating our history and the importance of history, to recognise that we are somebody and we contribute to the world. So just arrived today. I'm in Alabama, in Montgomery, which in many ways is seen as the birthplace of the civil rights movement in America. I'm here next to Rosa Parks, who, as you know, played a key role with the bus boycott, and recently we've just lost in the UK Roy Hackett, who did a similar bus boycott and led that in Bristol. Today is also the 60th anniversary of Jamaican independence, so it's really kind of fitting that I'm here in Montgomery, the home of the civil rights movement, and as we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Jamaica, it's really great to be here. So I just want to thank all my family in Jamaica, my family also in America and Canada, of course my family in the UK too, and to all the Jamaicans and all the people of diaspora heritage and Jamaican heritage, and those who want to be Jamaican, happy 60th anniversary. And as we move to a republic, let's see it as a starting point for Jamaica to be truly independent. So it's just great. So watch out for my post while I'm here in Montgomery. So this is my second day in Montgomery, in Alabama. Today we went to visit the Legacy Museum and also the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. Both these, the museum and the memorial, were dedicated again to the history of African Americans. The Legacy Museum, I've been to many museums around the world connected with our history. I have to say this is one of the most powerful ones. It starts again with the history of enslavement, with a powerful cinematic film of the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and the many millions that perished. Then looking at the whole history of enslavement in America through slavery, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, you name it. But what was powerful about this particular exhibition, it focuses on racial terror. It's very explicit about the nature of violence that was impacted on African Americans throughout its history, even up today around mass incarceration. It goes into great detail about the violence perpetrated against African Americans during the time of slavery. Very explicit section on lynching, the whole history of lynching, which is reflected here at this memorial, which is an acknowledgement of those men, women and children between the period of 1870 to 1950 that were killed and murdered as a result of lynching, particularly in the deep south of America. And the exhibition finishes with modern day structural racism, looking at mass incarceration as an ongoing continuum of racial violence or racial terror against African Americans. If you do have the opportunity to come here to Alabama, to Montgomery, I do recommend this. It can reflect on me here in Britain. We don't have enough memorials around racial violence against black and brown people in this country. We need to have more reminders of this explicit violence, where it's violence in terms of the police, what happens in our mental health institutions, and hate crime in society in general. It's a reminder that we have to do better. It's a reminder that we are all human. And it's a reminder that if we are going to be serious about dismantling structural racism, we have to confront the past, which also means talking about the violence that we are still experiencing, and particularly the trauma that we are still dealing with, violence. Whether it's going back to the colour bar, whether it's talking about what happened during the 80s and 90s, and more recently around the Woodruff scandal and child Q. This is still ongoing, this racial terror, this racial violence in Britain. This needs to stop if we want to have our humanity back. So, I'm still in Alabama. Actually in Birmingham in Alabama, and we're at Samford University. It's I think it's one of the 80th universities of the 4,000 universities here in America. And we've had a fantastic day meeting various people here. By this monument, which was established by the university just before Black Lives Matter, recognising the enslaved Africans who were told in the grounds of this university, which was a plantation, and it recognises African Americans who've been to this university, and particularly recognising one particular enslaved African who saved his former master while the university was on fire. One of the key things on this trip in Alabama is the nature of incarceration. We've done various presentations around death row, where heard from work of the Equality Justice Initiative, and also recently from another organisation around the pernicious nature of capital punishment, and particularly for many men and women who are on death row, or if not on death row, they have life sentences with no parole whatsoever. We had the opportunity to meet one gentleman called Ronald, who'd been in prison for 37 years, shared his experience of being there, and asked him questions about how did he survive 37 years in a state penitentiary prison. And he talked about meditation, his family, wants to be a model prisoner, and he's out, so he's able to share his story. He's very lucky to do so. But what's quite clear is the nature of the criminal justice system in America. I know that we have issues here in the UK, but trust me, in America it's far worse. We all know about the prison pipeline, but what we have here in a situation that in Alabama, it's got one of the highest rates of executions in America. It's got the highest number of people on death row, and it's got over 50%, equivalent of about 30% of the population in prisons are from Alabama, despite the fact that the population does not reflect that. So there's still a long way to go in America around criminal justice system. It's a reminder for us in the UK that we've got a lot to do to make sure the criminal justice system is accountable, it's fair, it's transparent, and calling out institutional racism when required as well. This is really, really important, especially in the context of what we know about stop and search and the escalation of how young people get caught in the system, and also more recently the child Q report and the other reports around children who are treated. And what's quite clear in the American situation here, that up to 2005, over 300 children were executed in America. That's unbelievable. And it was only a result of a court case that stopped that. But there are still children who are still facing virtually life imprisonments. I'm sure it's breaching all the UN conventions on the rights of the child. We have to make sure in Britain that we never go down this slippery slope, protecting all children, to make sure that, irrespective of what they do, we form forms of rehabilitation and support. So this is Alabama, in Birmingham, and everyone's in Birmingham. I know you had a fantastic Commonwealth Games, and it's great to maybe should twin here with this Alabama here. So here at the Edmund Buttus Bridge in Selma, famous for that historic march in 1965 led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which played a key role in the Voters Registration Act of 1965, where African Americans in solidarity with lots of white people came here, marched despite the fact that they were attacked. A lot of people were arrested by the police, but it played a key moment in American history and world history. This historic march. Ironically, Edmund Buttus is actually a Confederate soldier, or later was involved in the Ku Klux Klan locally, and this bridge was actually named after him, ironically, for suppressing black people. So it's quite interesting that we've reclaimed this and make it part of African American history and world history. And it's just a reminder that, you know, it's overcoming adversity, and more importantly, fighting for our rights and for democracy and voting, which in many ways is quite important in Britain today. And obviously we've got organisations like Operation Black Vote who have done a key job in the last 3 decades in promoting voter registration. I'm in Greenwood and I'm outside of Vernon Church. This church is quite important. It's in the heart of Greenwood, and when the massacre happened, lots of African Americans took refuge in this church, and so it's named after my family name, so it's quite an honour to be associated with this. I'll be telling more about the Greenwood story and the massacre tomorrow in my posts. There's just so much information to digest here in this neighbourhood, and this horrific mass genocide on American soil, and so I'm still processing it, but I'll be sharing stories for the next few days. Hi, so I'm in Greenwood again. I've been spending the last few hours walking around this famous neighbourhood in Tulsa in Oklahoma in USA. 1921, there was a massacre where white supremacists and Ku Klux Klan, with the support of the police, basically destroyed this neighbourhood. It was called Black Wall Street because lots of the African Americans made a lot of money from the oil industry, and there were many businesses, successful businesses, that had a number of banks. And what was the key thing about Black Wall Street was all the money was kept within the African American community. There were a number of multi-millionaires. A number of them even had their own private planes. It was that successful. But there was one incident which gave the justification for white supremacists to destroy this neighbourhood. They razed it to the ground. There's even evidence that the area was bombed as well. For many decades, this history has been suppressed in America and around the world. It's only been because of the survivors, and currently there are about 3 survivors left, all of them over 100 years old, who have been able to tell the story. There are a number of activists who have met, who are now demanding reparations, and for all lost, for the businesses that were destroyed, all the homes that were destroyed, and more importantly for the lives that were also destroyed. The issue of reparations, as we now know, is growing, not only simply about what has happened in the Caribbean, around CARICOM, and other parts of the world. Obviously it's been ongoing in American history. And it's something as well that in the UK that we must seriously consider as well. I'm here in the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park. John Hope Franklin was a well-known African American historian, wrote a number of scholarly books, and he was also from Tulsa as well. So it's fitting and proper that we're here. It's a place of reflection. There's so much hurt, community trauma in this community, that this is quite a powerful place to come and reflect. I've got more to report, so please watch this space. I'm here at Oak Lawn Cemetery in Tulsa, from probably about 8-9 miles away from Greenwood, where the Greenwood massacre took place in 1921. Over 300 people were murdered by white supremacists. Many hundreds were saved in the Vernon Church in the basement. What I found out talking to local people here, many people were dumped in the River Arkansas. There were lots of mass graves made, and even in Greenwood, people say that some of the bodies are still in the ground in Greenwood. At this cemetery, about 18 months ago, a team of archaeologists found a mass grave of 12 wooden coffins, and it looked like a local funeral director was given some money to bury these unmarked graves. So I'm here at the site, giving my respects to the ancestors, to them and their families, because what's quite clear that in Tulsa, even though there is a strong resilience and people are moving forward, community trauma and intergenerational trauma is still evident and still powerful. That is why they are campaigning for reparations, but not only just simply for the economic loss incurred by their descendants in 1921, but the ongoing trauma which has paralysed the community here. This is lessons for us to learn in the UK, especially around certain communities who've been let down by the government and by local authorities over many decades for a similar claim for reparations. What has added more insult to injury, it's behind me, is an interstate motorway. This motorway runs right through the heart of Greenwood. A lot of people felt that this was deliberately done by the state authorities to split the neighbourhood in two. And then what you have there, you have gentrification, regeneration, as we all know. And there is some black businesses there. But what's quite clear that are they really benefited from this gentrification process? You've got a massive baseball stadium, which I went to last night, the so-called Drillers. You've got the stadium right in the middle of Greenwood. Does the community own that? Does the community have a say? Well, I was there. There's hardly a handful of black people there anyway. A lot needs to be done. But I'm just here to give my respects to the ancestors here, looking round. As you can see, this cemetery is for people from Tulsa. The best parts, as you can imagine, are for white people. And down here is just for people, unmarked graves. Again, not recognising our grief, not recognising our sorrow, and it's just outrageous. So I'm just here to pay my respects to them as well. So my message to everyone in the UK is we still have to fight for race equality, social justice for all. This is really, really important. And it's important that families who have experienced discrimination and they've lost loved ones, whether it's through police brutality or hostile environment policy, need to be respected, need to get compensation and reparations for the losses so they can move on with their lives. So this is, we've been in Chicago for the last few days, and I'm with Aisha from Nigeria, and she's been part of this experience of looking at issues around structural racism in America. And Aisha knows Britain, she has family here. In Britain, everyone knows what happened to Child Q. Aisha is a legend in Africa, but in the world. A serious legend, fighting for women's rights, girls' rights. Played a key role around what happened in Nigeria, what happened with those young girls that were abducted. How long ago was that?
8 years ago.
So please, what's your message to the girls and women in Britain?
To the girls and women in Britain, I would say to you, you are valid. You are citizens and you are not slaves. And whatever they do, they must ensure that indeed your rights are enshrined. Your rights are enshrined. You're human beings and nobody should take you lower. The society should not tell you what to do. We should aspire, go ahead, be great. Don't limit yourself to anything. Don't limit yourself to what the society wants to be. Shatter the glass ceilings, keep going, and don't allow anybody discriminate you. You have rights. Women's rights are human rights, and we say that repeatedly, and no human being is more human being than any human being. And as women, we are not slaves to anyone. We are citizens, we are human beings, and we have a place in this world, and we need to occupy it. So I would say to you, stay strong and keep fighting. Don't let anybody tell you that your voices should be shut down. Keep fighting, keep speaking, and ensure that indeed you are respected like every other person.
Thanks for that, and Aisha, it's been a pleasure, working with you, meeting with you, and hopefully we can continue the work when you come to the UK to see family as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Patrick. You're so amazing. It's a pleasure doing this. Thank you.
Okay then. So over and out, and I'll be back in the UK in the next 24 hours.